Hey guys, I'm Rachel and welcome back to part 2 of making this helmet in Blender. So let's pick up where we left off. So we started with the sculpt and now we're doing some basic reap topology over top that sculpt. And here we're just working on like the front face part. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking these pieces and I'm just modeling them separately from the sculpt now, giving them thickness by extruding them out. And yeah, just making sure that the edges look smooth and even. And then I'm adding in some loop cuts for the edges, for the holding edges, for the subdivision. And so I'm just like beveling the edges right there and just cleaning up the geometry to get that nice sort of beveled edge in the front. And I'm just going to move around and just like position these vertexes in a way that I think looks nice. And you can see here that I'm not like following the sculpt exactly. I'm just kind of using it as like a loose reference for how I want things to look. And I'm using this like very quick subdivision surface model to like define what I'm trying to go for. See, I'm just positioning the faces a bit. And then I just take the edges of this one and extrude it out. The reason why is I didn't want to take the entire face with the circle cut and extrude it out because that would have made some like messy geo. And here I'm just kind of trying to solve the geometry for this bevel that I made. It gets a bit messy, but I think I come up with a pretty good solution. I just like to move the vertexes around and see like what looks good for the subdivision modifier and like what's the smoothest possible result we can get from this. So yeah, I'm just going to go around to all the pieces that I created in the first tutorial, all those just flat faces, and I'm just going to extrude them in and give them depth. Here I'm using a solidify modifier just really quickly because I couldn't extrude it in and it wasn't working very well. So I just use a solidify modifier. And I'm like flaying out the edges a bit just to give it like a nice sort of bevel to it almost. So yeah, you can see as I'm working on this, the geometry isn't really that complicated at all. I'm just pushing and pulling edges and trying to see like what sort of shapes look good and just like always moving stuff around, just giving it thickness and giving it bounding loops. Here I'm working on the screen a bit. I gave it some thickness and I'm just like tweaking it a bit. Don't forget to get rid of the inner faces. Yep, so just doing some more scaling, taking the edges and just scaling them in. Trying to find a good position for them that looks good. Here I'm just going to try and go around and clean up the edges a bit. I'm trying to make some adjustments to the model and like clean up the hard edges. Here I'm trying to solve this pinching issue in this corner right here. Yeah, because that pinch doesn't look super nice. So I'm just trying to figure out what sort of geo I can do there. Now we're just going to go on to the other parts of the model that I haven't modeled out, which would be like the top crown right here. And we're going to just do the same pattern. Here I'm using, like, if you can see right there, the loop edge is going around the tube. And that just allows me to put like a bounding edge all the way around the tube. And it also allows for the subdivision to just look really smooth on that edge. So here I'm just extruding the edges in just to have like another vent. This might be like a vent or a light on the top of the helmet. Yep, just extruding the edges down. Pulling some faces out. Just looking at the topology of the mesh and just trying to make it as smooth as possible. Here I'm working on that little side that like cuts into the visor a bit. Just a really simple like piece. It's like got only 6 faces to define its area. Yeah, and we're just gonna move all the edges that we created from the sculpt, but we're gonna just move it so that it matches with what we have on the mesh right now. Yeah, so here I'm just duplicating that edge since it follows it pretty exactly. So just to create the other piece behind the head. And you'll find as you do like more of this sub-D modeling, just how like easy like solutions come to you. So you want to have this like edge loop on the outside, just so it like subdivides a certain way and just gives you a nice smooth result. And that's something you'll learn if you do sub-D modeling a lot. It's just the edge flow and how stuff looks when it is subdivided. And just extruding it in. I'm using Alt-S to scale along the normals, and that will sometimes it works. It'll give it like a flayed out sort of look to the model. But yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just like scales along the normals. And yeah, it's super handy for like making some of these shapes. Yeah, just working on this point. This point gave me a little bit of trouble, but it's just like such a hard line right there. I didn't really know how to make it look any better. All right, so here I am using a feature that's built into Blender. It's called Mean Crease, and it's really good for just creasing the edges of your subdivision model without having to use like edge loops or more geo than necessary. The only thing about mean creases is that I don't think mean creases can be exported outside of Blender. Like, I think they're just a Blender supported feature. I'm not sure if that's right or not, but yeah. So you want to be a bit careful with that. But yeah, it gives this really nice, like, hard edge to your models, which is like super handy for keeping your geometry count down. And the reason why I like to keep my geometry count down is just because I like to handle the geo without it getting super messy. I mean, it is messy, but without it getting super messy. I still want to have control over my model and like understand what it's doing and being able to fix whatever problems it has or move it into a new direction very quickly. There are some limitations to mean crease. Sometimes the geo that it creases, the front top faces will pinch over top of the bottom faces. So you just have to be aware of if that happens to your model, just not to push it that far. If that does happen with your models, then I would say just use edge loops, like use more edge loops just to fix that. Creases are I only use creases for just like the smallest little edges, just to like harden up the smallest edges, but nothing too major. With all these like giant corners, you just want to use edge loops. So here's like one of those little parts I was talking about that just kind of fits in between those machined plates. And here I'll just add like a little vent to it. By like insetting a face and then pulling the edge out and then like insetting the inside face again and extruding it inwards. And it makes that cool little vent detail, which I love a lot. So yeah, just for like little edges like here, you can see that edge was pinching a bit. So here I'm taking the very edge of the visor and I sort of duplicated it and made its own object. And I'm using a command in HardOps to convert that edge into a curve. And it's a super handy feature. I think it's called Curve Extract. But yeah, I use it a lot in this project just to add those like curve details. And it's just one click and it gives you so much detail with these pipes. You don't want to overuse it at all, but it's very good for adding like these trims. And with the visor like this, you kind of have to have some sort of trim just to make sure that the meshes sort of make sense in like how it's built. So here I'm using a curve and I'm just putting an array modifier on it. And I'm just going to use it as sort of some pipe working or maybe some wires. And I'm just going to use that detail to fill in some of the gaps between these platings. I'm just going to manipulate the geometry to accommodate that sort of detail a bit more. There's not really a particular like way that I put detail and like fill stuff in. I just mess around and see what looks nice. So here I'm working on that little sort of clip piece, which I just start from a box and I put a subdivision surface modifier on it and just do some simple extruding of the edges and beveling. Here I'm just insetting those faces with the hotkey I and just adding some loop cuts to harden up the edges a bit. And then using a hop smear to mirror all these details across. So the hop smear is just, it's a mirroring tool in hard ops, and it's very quick. As you can see, it was just pulled up like a little widget that allowed you to choose what axes to mirror across. And then it just automatically puts the modifier there, which is super handy when you have to mirror like a ton of like small, tiny objects, like I usually have to do for models like this. So here I'm just trying to fill in some of the detail, just adding a little bit more edge detail, defining the shapes a bit more, just generally just like cleaning the model a bit. Here I'm adding an event just with that insetting and pulling the face out and then extruding it in. And then I'm just like collapsing some of the edges like this, just so it has like a very smooth like transition into the main form. Here I'm going to add like another little trim detail by just giving it a solidify modifier and then taking the shape and just like working it a bit. I'm not super scared of like n-gons on the corner of these objects. Most of the time I just like tuck it under inside the plates like you see here. Like I just have that giant n-gon face at the base. Alright guys, so here we're at the end of the second video, so I'll see you in the third part. Bye!